So we did want to wrap up Candide today, and I think we have a little bit of an interesting discussion here because after sort of spending most of the last episode laughing at how funny this book was, it ends on kind of a strange note with a strange message. Walter, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
Well, so yes, the last part of Candide, and I reiterate to everyone, I'm reading it along with you. It was a book that I had not familiarized myself with until these last couple of weeks. The last movement of Candide is as you say, a little bit thoughtful and slow and contemplative. And after all of the farcical Three Stooges, ultra violence, Monty Python style, ultra violence and suffering and horror of the earlier part, it turns into Candide's quest to reunite with Cunegonde, the girlfriend, the true love. And, he chases her across several countries. He goes to England to try to find her. He finds out finally she's in Constantinople. On the way to catching up with her finally, he has one particular dinner with a bunch of deposed kings in Venice.
Six of them.
And he realizes, there's Edward the something of England, and then there's a Russian noble, and there's another one, and they're all poor by this time. And what's interesting is Candide spends the last part of the book rich, okay? Because of this brief visit to El Dorado in South America, his pockets are full of diamonds. And so he can commandeer any ship. He can help any poor person. He can hire any friend. And he kind of hires on this philosopher who's the counterpart of Pangloss earlier.
Martin.
Martin. And Martin is a pessimist in the way that Pangloss was an optimist. Martin really is a cynic. He sees through everything. He expects nothing from life except unhappiness and disappointment. And at one time, Candide and he see a couple that appear to be very happy, and Candide says, "Oh, at last, we've seen a happy couple." And Martin says, "I'll bet you that if you look into it, they're miserable."
Right.
And it turns out, in fact, that the couple consists of a prostitute who's in a terrible situation and pretending to be happy, and a guy who's also unhappy. And then they meet the kings. And so it becomes the vanity of human wishes. Is there any such thing as happiness anywhere in the world? Well, Candide is convinced there is if he can only reunite with Cunegonde, his long lost love. And when he finds her, what has happened? Oh, well.
She's lost her looks. Let's put that in a polite way.
She's lost her looks.
And he desperately does not want to marry her, but being a man of honor, he announces his intention to do so. At which point, Cunegonde's brother, who has reappeared at the end of the story, even though Candide has already killed him once for objecting to the idea of Candide marrying Cunegonde, he now objects again, even though Cunegonde is an old woman, and is no longer the beauty she once was, and he's kind of doing her a favor by marrying her. He objects and says, "How dare you? You're nobody in social stature to be marrying her." And anyway, they move past that. He eventually does marry Cunegonde, and then there's this passage in the book where Voltaire writes, "It is natural to imagine that after so many disasters, Candide married, and living with the philosopher Pangloss, the philosopher Martin, the prudent Cacambo, and the old woman, having besides brought so many diamonds from the country of the ancient Incas, must have led a very happy life." But no, right? they aren't particularly happy. And the old woman has this comment, this very pointed comment toward the end. She says, I want to know which is worse, to be ravished 100 times by Negro pirates, to have a buttock cut off, to run the gauntlet among the Bulgarians, to be whipped and hanged at an auto da fe, to be dissected, to row in the galleys, in short, to go through all the miseries we have undergone, or to stay here and have nothing to do. It is a great question, says Candide. And you know what? And then at the end, sort of without answering the question really, Voltaire dismounts into this what feels to me like a cliche. The famous term in French, if we can show it, is il faut what is it? Il faut cultiver notre jardin. We must cultivate our garden, and basically the end of the story is that yeah, life sucks, but we should just go on. We should just work without expectations, and we must cultivate our garden. And I don't know, Walter. It feels like a false note at the end to me. What do you? How do you feel about it?
Well, it's a very traditional note. I had a professor at Princeton, a guy named Seth Lehrer, whose key text was a book called The Consolations of Philosophy by a medieval philosopher theologian called Boethius. And Boethius's conclusion about life was that it's a horror show, it's disappointing. When you're up, you're about to go down. When you're down, you're about to go up, but only to go down again. There's only one final good, reliable source of gratification, and that's thought. That's basically cultivating your own garden, retiring from the world to your meditations. Samuel Johnson, the great English, lexicographer and wit, wrote a book called Rasselas, which also came to this conclusion. Rasselas might have been right about the time of Candide or a little later. I'm not sure. You kind of go to your happy valley. You go to this, you go into the sunset, and you tend your farm. And that Voltaire, after this outrageous first 2/3, should come to the same conclusion is a little disappointing. He's been so iconoclastic. He's been so out of control and edgy that for him to say, "Oh, tend your garden, lower your expectations, retire from the world," is all that we were expecting something more. And Martin even sort of codifies this and says, well, in life, you're either on an adventure and you're suffering from, the pain and agonies that come in with adventure, or you're bored. And it's as though Voltaire sort of comes down on the side of being bored. As you say, it's an extremely traditional view that goes back to the ancients. And I think you're right. There's a strange way in which this last part of the book doesn't fit the rest of it, because it's almost Christian. You see the kings, and none of the kings are happy. Look at the mighty. The first shall be last. Voltaire in many ways was an anti-clerical, anti-religious, anti-Christian thinker. And here he seems to be agreeing with Jesus that it's better to be humble. It's, a rich man can't go to heaven. And let's just, and so let's just be quiet, gentle, and stay in, stay out of the way of the big winds and blusters and flurries of life. I too felt a little let down. To be honest, I did.
So when I read this, or when I reread this, I guess one of the thoughts I had is, ending with this weird, some vague metaphor in a book that was so full of sort of rapier, sharp observations and lightning fast action. It felt completely off key. So what did it remind me of? I mean, if we can show it, there's a scene from the movie Being There, and this is Jerzy Kosinski's hero, Chance the gardener, who mistakenly becomes a person of great influence. When he's actually talking about gardening, they all think that he's talking about something deep. And this is a scene where Jack Warden, who's an important sort of politician, is asking his opinion on the economics.
Mr. Garner, do you agree with Ben, or do you think we can stimulate growth through temporary incentives?
As long as the roots are not severed, all is well, and all will be well in the garden.
In the garden?
Yes. In a garden, growth has its season. First comes spring and summer.
Okay, all right. I can't watch anymore. So this is why I can't. I love that movie. I love that scene. But in the context of Voltaire, where the whole book is this rollicking rocket of a story, to have it end on that note, and that's essentially what it is, isn't it? I mean, am I missing something? Yes, tend to your business and, live out your, I mean, it's not actually even a message that I disagree with. Like, in the end, just live your life and, do your best and put one foot in front of the other, and you know what, it's not so bad. I think it's a dramatic mistake. Like, I think Voltaire got so wrapped up in his own head at the end of the book that what he should have done is just ended it in some kind of painful crash or some bizarre, I don't know, dismount where all the bodies end up in a pile and there's a laugh line at the end. Like, to me, that's the only way that book should have ended. I don't buy this ending.
Well, as I say, it's a traditional ending because the last third of it is about the folly of riches, for example. We're shown over and over that the fact that he has unlimited diamonds in his pocket, only gets him ripped off and in more trouble. It doesn't bring satisfaction. We're showed that the kings, despite their thrones, have no permanent exalted state. They will be laid low. Everything will be laid low. Now, this is 1759. The French Revolution is going to come not that far from now, and Voltaire will be thought of as a father of the French Revolution. In some ways, I think what he's doing is that he's caught himself. He suddenly is talking about the common man. Basically, he's a little bit like Tolstoy at the end of his career, suddenly deciding the only thing you can do is be a peasant and tend to your own plantation, basically.
Right. Cut your own resolute path through life as with a scythe, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a little like when Bob Dylan, after his, speed freak decade of the 1960s, decides to move to a farm in Woodstock, New York, and do the basement tapes. It's after a lot of stimulation, after a lot of experiment, a lot of adventure, you come to earth on the, little homestead. It's a little like the Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And maybe that's the price of narratives that go too far out, that they always tend to return to a rather schmaltzy protected space and a philosophy.
But I don't think that's necessary, though. Like,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen in Catch-22.
It doesn't happen in Catch-22. Like we did the Metamorphosis, where it sort of ends, and then the sister stretches out her young body. Like, an abrupt end to a great story works, I always think, and it's much better than ending on a false note. Or I don't know, maybe it's not a false note, it's just a weird note for this book, which is rollicking, confident, and funny. I don't know.
It is, but in a story, in order to tell it, you have to set certain parameters, and they govern it. But they can become your enemy at the end, I know, as a novelist. And some of the parameters that he's set that I think cripple him in terms of an ending are these. His main characters can't die. Okay, no matter what happens to them, they don't die. Pangloss gets hung but survives and wakes up during a dissection.
Yeah, that was funny, that part. Yeah.
Candide can't die. None of them expire for good. And so when you've knocked out the ability of having your hero destroyed, then you've basically got to leave them somewhere. Happily ever after. You have no choice. The other thing that he's done is that he has over and over told us that optimism, expecting that everything be perfect, is ridiculous. But he's not willing to go with the pessimism of Martin either. For some reason, the ending that I thought was natural was for Candide to lose his goodness, become misanthropic, become,
sadistic, or
a terror of disappointed, cynical thought. And there's a character in the book who is that way, and it's a Venetian aristocrat who Candide meets about 3 chapters before the end. And this is a man who has everything, and he has a big library of books, and he basically goes through all the classics, including like Homer and Milton and so on, and says, and all the philosophers, and runs them down. They're talking about a bunch of nothing. This is boring. That story is flawed, and so on. And he is the critic, the person who's perpetually disappointed, the aristocrat whose tastes are so refined that no one can live up to them. And in a weird way, that I felt was the Voltaire-like position. I felt like that was Voltaire. And Candide, he just had sort of used up as a puppet for all this other stuff. And he just had to set him down somewhere. But he did not give him much of a lesson at all, except stay where you are and don't leave.
Yeah, I guess so. I can live with it, but it's not my favorite ending to a book. Let's put it that way. I love the book overall, though. What I'll say is, I think it's a model for how future satires were written, and he was roughly also a contemporary with Swift, who approached his subject matter with a similar mindset. Just Voltaire was much more of much more economical in the way he wrote, although Swift was a very entertaining and gifted writer too, right? I just felt, I don't know, something was off about the end here for me. But overall, it's a book that makes you laugh at the pretensions of everything, and makes you realize that there almost anything that you think is going to be some kind of intellectual solace is going to turn out to be a false door in the end, right? And I would have preferred, some other consolation in the end. I mean, you mentioned John Lennon, all he needed is love. I think that would have been a good ending for the story, right? Like, when there's nothing else in life, there's at least that. But he doesn't even really go there. But but overall, I love the book.
Yeah. Well, as I say, the adventures of the rock and roll adventurer often end up, in the retirement home. And that's kind of how this ends. And I think Voltaire himself, who was a kind of a provincial child of a minor nobility and a bourgeois parent and an aristocratic parent, made a huge show of himself. He was an internationally famous, almost uniquely acclaimed character. He was a dramatist. He was a bit like Shakespeare or something, if Shakespeare had, been a public person. And he was at almost past the height of his fame when he wrote this. So I think it has the color of a person who is retiring from an incredibly controversial public life. And that biographical note overwhelms the narrative itself. I think Voltaire was a little tired of his public performance by this time.
Yeah, I guess so. One of our commenters, and I can't even pronounce this, Adichat Sound Bobkawa 5328 says, definitely can see echoes of Candide and the Python stuff. Really, the entire Monty Python's Flying Circus and the movies, Life of Brian, the Holy Grail, maybe even, all of that is Candide. All they did is take every single ridiculous idea from the past and lampoon them with sort of equal brutality, right? So Christianity, Princess Bride too, right? Yeah. But yeah, everything from the Inquisition to let he who is without sin cast the first stone, to the witch hunts, to all of it. They all got sent up, and those sort of brilliant Cambridge and Oxonian wits. This is the kind of thing that they would do. Is they would take those ideas and sort of take them apart, and all you have to do is come up with some surface conceit satirically, and it falls down pretty quickly. But what Voltaire did at his time, I think, was unique. I don't think anyone had been irreverent to that degree before, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of anyone who compares, and apart from Swift, Joe. Who was it who wrote Pamela? Is it Fielding, right?
Yeah. Lawrence, a little bit like Lawrence Stern, Tristram Shandy.
Stern, yeah, but that was later, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but books that remind me of Candide, Huckleberry Finn, strangely. I think ending the philosophical novel is always a problem. Think about how Douglas Adams did it with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They're looking for the answer. They're looking for the final solution. They're looking for the key to the puzzle. And what is it? What, 42? Was that the answer to what the meaning of life was at the end?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. He just makes a joke of how impossible it is to fulfill that expectation. And I think by the time Voltaire had set it all up, he realized that maybe he had created a difficult expectation to satisfy. But as far as the humor at its peak, about, I don't know, chapter 20 or so, it's unmatched for anarchy, for bitterness, for absurdist comedy, and
erudition too, right?
And erudition. And there is a joke, per paragraph that has never worn out, whether it's giving the Buenos Aires, Don all the different names, or, the whole catalog of sexual insults to some of the poor heroines.
Even Cunegonde's brother in the end sort of offhandedly mentions that he nearly suffers capital punishment for bathing naked with a Muslim, and he tells a totally unconvincing story about how they came to be like both naked and bathing at the same time. It's just a very funny passage. He like when he just lets go, it's all incredibly funny. But anyway, I thought that was a really fun book, great book, and enlightening in a lot of ways. Well, I guess it should be enlightening, right? He's the father of the Enlightenment. But very fun to do with you, Walter, and we'll have to put our heads together to think of what book to do next. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us on what will probably turn out to be kind of a bummer of a show looking back. But look, in all seriousness,
people in the comments have said I refuse to acknowledge the mistake. I haven't refused to acknowledge it at all. I just, based on the two pieces of evidence I had, I haven't yet been able. I think Matt gets more information at his terminal than I do over here. I happily acknowledge the mistake if it was one, but
no, I'm more pissed off at the PD, but I should have double checked it before
at the police department. Yeah. When the police department misinforms you, you don't think that there's someone beyond them that you should be checking with.
Right, but you gotta. It's look. That's part of the whole deal. Is you got to own it when you get it wrong, and so I am owning it. I should have checked and didn't, but here to tell you that when that does happen, we'll let you know. So thanks everybody for hanging in with us, and we'll have a happier, less ridiculous show next time, and see you again soon.